Hello, and welcome back to the Almanac Comicopia, your guide to the grand meta story of the DC Universe. This video marks the beginning of the Almanac's second chapter, Big Two's Beginnings. You know who they are. This episode is called Clark's First Year, out of respect of the many Superman who will come. This timeline helps us visualize the relative proximity of our four heroes' debuts thus far. To the best of my understanding, the early Action Comics stories are set around the time that they're written, that would be the summer of 1938. With that in mind, this video looks at a mere portion of Shuster and Siegel's legendary run on Action Comics, those issues that were written and thus assumed to take place in the remainder of 1938. First up, we're looking at Action Comics number 2, cover not shown since it doesn't feature Supes. Instead, we're looking at the very first panel, picking up exactly where we left off last issue and last video, with Clark and lobbyist Greer racing towards the street. I don't love this panel, but I do enjoy the inclusion of the cars and tram for the sake of scale. The little people as well, they help add to the idea that this is supposed to be the resolution of a dramatic cliffhanger, but still, it's not great to me. What is great, as before, is the lettering on the title Superman. Awesome. As they strike the sidewalk, it bursts into fragments. Clark was indeed trolling the lobbyist. Say, wasn't that fun? Let's do it again. No, I'll talk. The man behind the threatening wars, Emil Norvell, the munitions magnate. You'll find him at his Lexington Park estate. I swear, we haven't missed something. It seems that Clark, made aware of this war by the chief last issue, decided that he could do better reporter work or just straight up heroism by putting his powers into play with a politician or related party. Hence the scenes from Action Comics number 1 with Clark and DC, and hence his interest in this slimeball lobbyist. Next, we get this beautiful scene of Clark atop the Washington Monument, full moon and wispy clouds, scanning the Capitol for the Lexington Park estate. At the very same time, Greer is now warning Norvell about Clark's imminent arrival. In the scene that follows, we're treated to further evidence of Clark's absent wisdom and Machiavellian proclivities. First, he takes Greer at his word, even though the man would have said anything to spare himself after Clark leaping hundreds of feet in the air with the dude. On this note, unless it occurred off-panel, Clark never corroborated Greer's claims about this Norvell fellow. Second, regarding Norvell, he's trespassing, an unlawful enter of this guy's study. And third, when doing so, instead of explaining anything, perhaps using a display of his powers to convince Norvell that it's worth talking things out or worth hearing Clark's explanation, he just waltzes in and threatens. Whether you like it or not, Norvell, you're coming with me. Sorry, but I have other plans, Norvell gleefully responds, reaching behind him to press a call button. Panels built into the walls of the study slide back, allowing goons, wielding Tommy guns, of course, to get the drop on Clark. Unharmed, of course, and charging said goons, he now prompts Mr. Green here to drop the weapon. Good heavens, he won't die! Glad I can't say the same for you, Clark threatens. The dialogue reminds me of a gritty 80s comic, but this is the original stuff right here. Several minutes later, we see Clark and Norvell on the pier. Clark didn't murder anyone in the previous scene, by the way, just in case you were wondering. However, he did give a few dozen henchmen Tommy gun neckties, and this is why we now see Norvell sheepishly responding I'll be on it. To Clark, who presumably just brought Norvell to the harbor in the same way he carried Greer, now pointing out into the night. You see that steamer? It's the Baranta. Tomorrow it leaves for San Monte. Unless I find you aboard it when it sails, I swear I'll follow you to whatever hole you hide in and tear out your cruel heart with my bare hands. This is some cold shit, Clark. I'm here for it, but wow. This is a far cry from the Boy Scout Superman I know.
We turn the page and hell yeah, more Lois! I don't know about you, but I did not expect to get more Lois so soon. As the scene played out on the Baranta, it became like a no-brainer to me that Clark never did anything strange, taking the train down to Washington, D.C. and not going straight to the zone of the war the chief asked him to report on. You see, in 1938, a plane would have been so expensive. I just missed this. I completely missed this. Anyway, when Clark runs into Lois, proclaiming, "Lois, why, what are you doing here?" She tells him, "Our editor decided to have me accompany you to the war zone and send back dispatches colored with my distinctive feminine touch." Huh? We just saw the bigotry of the chief last issue, telling Lois that she must have been seeing pink elephants because she said that she saw Superman. I mean, real cruel stuff. But if we're to take Lois at her word here, it would mean that he sees the value in other voices. An awfully progressive take for such a fellow. So I'm left believing instead, in my personal headcanon, that Lois, wise as she is, has established a new narrative for her own benefit. Keeping the hits coming, here's a super cool transitional panel wherein the narration tells us it is the first night out. As Norvell nervously paces his cabin, there comes a knock at the door. He answers it. Look at Clark's pointer knuckle. Do you see that tiny little emanata? It's so cute. I love it. In the ensuing scene, Clark backhandedly compliments Norvell for being smart enough to show up on the boat. Immediately after, Norvell speaks with a goon about a fabulous reward for killing the costumed man. What a fool. What a freaking fool. Please remember that Clark does not have super senses. The narration informs us. As Superman stands silently at the ship's rail, admiring the moonlight, he whirls suddenly at the sound of footsteps. He could have been caught unaware. Granted, he wouldn't be truly harmed, but I'm not sure how things would play out if Clark got thrown overboard. Surely he could swim fast enough to catch up to the steamer and be able to use his strength to climb the hull, right? What do y'all think? Okay, I cannot freaking believe this. Clark must have been seriously startled to lose enough control over his strength such that, for an instant, bracing himself against the rail caused it to give way. Not shown is the thugs reporting back to Norvell, who wickedly informed them that, "You'll get nothing!" My assumption was correct. The narration confirms it. Meanwhile, at that very instant, Superman, swimming vigorously, has caught up with the steamer. Nice! Any doubters in the comments, own up. According to the narration, Clark could climb aboard, but decides instead to swim past it, entertaining himself with a "see you later." I'm unclear on why he's doing this, especially because I'm not sure if the voyage is almost done. Wouldn't Lois be looking for Clark? Maybe my mind is poisoned by modern portrayals of the duo, and based on evidence so far she would avoid him for the entire voyage. I think that actually sounds more correct. What do you think? Clark could not have known that the goons would backstab Norvell. I doubt that he even knew that Norvell had stooges on the boat. But anyway, Clark must have been waiting to gank Norvell himself. Seeing the toughs, as the narration refers to them, about to murder Norvell, which is not shown here, Superman springs into action, shown here, to save the poor schlub. Holy cats, it's him! Clark subjects them to the severest thrashing of their lives. Not, quote, so far, quote, just period. The narration is telling us that they will never be beaten worse than this. What a hilarious touch. Continuing the comedy, Clark explains that he saved Norvell because the fate you escaped is pleasant indeed compared to the one I have in store for you. The fate? Norvell must join the San Monte army. Again, here is Clark doing whatever he wants with people. Yeesh. I just can't imagine that Clark's original intention was making this guy join their army. But now that he saved him, had the intrusive thought and rolled with it. I just really cannot stomach the idea of Clark being that level of a manipulator, while also being so not wise. You? I know it doesn't look like Clark, but Norvell spots Clark. Yes, I joined too. I couldn't bear being parted from you. Is this supposed to be funny? Seriously, I'm inquiring because this had got me cracking up the first time that I saw it. I just, look at Clark's hands on hips sass. My god, this comic is all over the place.
Shown now is some of my favorite art from this comic so far. A scene portraying Clark and Norvell marching in the Army's front lines, courtesy of Clark bullshitting a superior officer about the circumstances of the war, in a scene I did not include. "What are you trying to do? Kill us both?" Norvell naively inquires.
The company manages to reach and pitch camp without trouble, and then Clark, as Superman, infiltrates the enemy camp to do his day job, being a reporter. Here's more humor with Clark's "Smile, please! Thanks!" Meanwhile, we're treated to a scene of Lois and Mystery Woman, shown on screen, Lola Cortez, who have both registered at the same hotel. When Army officials show up, Lola retreats to hide a certain document in Lois's room. This is fun intrigue. Within minutes, the planted document is discovered in Lois's room. "Sorry, we must place you under military arrest," a soldier informs her. In no time at all, diegetically, and for the reader as you can see, "Sentence is passed." Lois calls out, "But I'm innocent!" to deaf ears. The judge merely declares, "You shall be executed at dawn for espionage." Holy smokes! Remember, Clark doesn't have super senses, and he's a ways away trolling Norvell military style. I'm kind of nervous for Lois. Unfortunately, in a huge blow to quality and in utter contrivance, Clark, as you see, overhears soldiers mouthing expository dialogue like puppets for Shuster and Siegel. This is a real low point of their work so far. "Have you heard? Lois Lane, a spy, is to be executed this morning," one says, to which the other replies, "Yes, and exactly at dawn." Okay, sorry to belabor the point, but seriously, who wouldn't just say, "a spy"? I don't get it. Also, what kind of robot response is "yes, and exactly at dawn"? Oh, bleh. Garbage. Primed now to be the hero Shuster and Siegel see him to be, Clark sprints the many miles to Lois's execution site. How he knows where this site would be, you've got me. With a second, if that to spare, down down into the range of fire plummets Superman, covering Lois's body with his own. He receives the shots meant for her. This is a great scene art-wise and thrill-wise. It's just not deserved. Then, in an inexplicable scene, Clark, mid-rescue of Lois, drops in on a torture session happening in the woods. The cool part of the scene is on screen now, with Clark tossing the guy as though he were hurling a javelin, making him vanish from view behind a grove of distant trees with a pitiful wail. What follows is a moment that I quite like, with Clark advising Lois to return to America, and then responding to her semi-desperate, "But when will I see you again?" with a stern, "Who knows? Perhaps tomorrow, perhaps never." I feel like the framing and colors really work here. It's a romantic moment. With the forced Lois interlude over, Clark returns to his company in the main plot line involving the war, and he finds them in the midst of a brutal air attack. The enemy soldier cries out, "Die like crawling ants!" I love this touch, seeing the moment from both perspectives simultaneously. In a tremendous and almost thrilling feat, I wish the artwork was a little more interesting here, Clark leaps towards the airplane, causing it to crash propeller first into his invulnerable skin, shattering said propeller, and leaving the airplane and its pilot to fall to their doom. Norvell foolishly thinks Clark has died here, which is a nice narrative touch. Moments later, Clark appears. "Hello! Surprised?" Here's some typical super trolling on Clark's part. "Superman! Still alive?" The emotional whiplash of seeing Clark alive, coupled with a likely genuine trauma from witnessing war firsthand, results in Norvell, lobbyist and munitions manufacturer, agreeing with Clark's request to cease making weapons. Job well done, Clark. Clark proceeds to take care of one more piece of business, despite the comic very well being able to end with the previous story beat. I will take this moment to gleefully, and with a spot of shame, say that I was 100% correct that this Clark, Clark of Earth 2, is 100% Machiavellian. This guy has taken it upon himself to kidnap both army leaders, one of whom sheepishly asks, "What do you want with us?" To which Clark explains that he's decided to end this war by having you two fight it out between yourselves. What a goddamn troll! Not talk it out, not sort it out, not I wanted you to see each other face to face so you saw that you were just people and you understood that you're the same people, blah blah blah. Nope, you guys fight. In response to their protest, he urges them, "Go ahead, fight, or I'll clean up on both of you myself." It's not even a joke. This is actually how Clark has decided he wants to resolve an entire war. I hate it. Because this is a comic book, things resolve quite nicely and humorously, albeit in a way that is far-fetched. The generals proclaim, "But why should we fight? We're not angry at each other," and come to realize with Clark's help that they're only fighting to drum up munitions sales. Action Comics number 2 concludes with Clark stupidly replying to the editor's comment that Superman hasn't appeared while he was away, with a, "Somehow, Chief, I've a hunch he'll make his appearance again, soon. Wink wink, nudge nudge and all." Perhaps camp is a bread and butter element of early comics. It's unclear to me as of now, but trying to take this as a real event in the world of Clark Kent and these other characters makes it feel totally ludicrous. Moving on. Action Comics 3 also does not feature Clark on its cover, opting to set its scene with a half-page splash, this time around depicting a creaking of timber, an ominous rumble, and then, with a terrific crash, the Blakely coal mine caves in, entrapping a lone miner within its terrible confines. I like this introduction to the comic, and we see our beautiful Phuperman, as always. We quickly find out that this description of the cave-in is diegetic, after a telegram prompts Clark to ask permission to cover this story. He sprints over in Superman garb, and then disguises himself as a bumbling miner to fake a tumble into the shaft. Quite a Batman move if you ask me. At the bottom of the shaft, Clark finds gas, poison gas, and we as readers find out that his physical structure allows him to be unaffected by the gas. So that's another feat or power that we can add to the list. Shortly, Clark finds the rescue party, knocked out, of course, and then manages to rescue them using the lift as shown. I wonder how he plans on explaining all this later, or if he's gonna duck out like back with the wife beater in issue 1. Quickly enough, Clark is able to find the cave-in and, consequently, the buried miner. He remarks that its removal will be mere child's play, and it is. Clark is able to free the miner. Unfortunately, the man is in critical condition. Clark, recognizing this, thinks out loud, "I've got to get him to a hospital at once." Unfortunately, there's a problem with the lift. Clark notices the signal cord, it doesn't work. Clark pins the man between his head and shoulder, proceeding to rocket up the elevator cable hand over hand, making absolutely no effort to hide the feat. I was quite disappointed that there was no confrontation in the following panels between the would-be witnesses of this feat and Clark in his miner's garb. I assume that Shuster and Siegel realized there was no explaining away and just wished to draw our attention elsewhere. Interestingly, Clark takes a social justice approach from here, visiting Stanislaw Kober, the maimed miner, to inquire, could the mine tragedy have been prevented? Kober replies, "Sure, months ago we know mine is unsafe, but when we tell boss Phuperman, they say, 'No like job, Stanislaw? Quit.'" Clark next visits the mine owner, Thornton Blakely, asking if he's arranged a pension for the unfortunate miner who was crippled by the cave-in. Totally unsurprisingly, this Blakely states, "Certainly not. Kober can thank his own carelessness for his plight." How cruel this is, even if it were true. As an aside, I'd rather like the rendering of Clark here with the subtle curve of his lip and the eyebrows demonstrating the degree of his concern. Quite evilly, Blakely responds to the concerns about safety conditions by stating that there are no safety hazards in my mind, but if there were, what of it? I'm a businessman, not a humanitarian. This prompts our champion of the oppressed to take action as Superman. Clark, clad in miner's garb, drops out of the skies like some occult-avenging demon into the barred and closely guarded confines of the Blakely estate. Drawn by the sound of laughter, music, and revelry, he peers through a window to discover a gay old party in progress. I dig this scene. I like the colors and composition of the artwork. How about you guys? Unfortunately, at that very moment, the guards jump Clark, who deliberately permits himself to be captured, then proceeds to ignore their questioning. "What were you doing here?" "He won't answer. Let's take him in to the boss." And so they do. Special shout out to Shuster and Siegel for the inclusion and depiction of this psychopath utterly horny to torture the miner. All I ask is a few minutes alone with this window peeper in the back room at headquarters, and you'll have a full confession, Mr. Blakely. What the fuck? What do they have in that back room? And more importantly, why do they have it? What is going on with this mine? I am dying to know if these threads are going to be addressed, because these tangents have made this story much more sinister and interesting than a simple, oh, the mine is dangerous story. Ego-tripping, Blakely falls for Clark's rube routine. I mean, check out the face he makes as he says, "Beautiful ladies, much music, rich party. I read of these things. Tonight I want to see them with own eyes." Blakely decides that the guards should beat him up, before immediately changing his mind and allowing the quote-unquote sap to stay and enjoy the festivities. This Blakely fellow really is ego-tripping out of his gosh darned peanut, because just let's read it all ourselves. He starts off, "To the right, folks, you see a social climbing miner who narrowly missed having his block knocked off because he attempted to see how the other half lives. On the left, my dull-witted friend, you see a mob of pampered nincompoops whose sole activity in life is searching for new ways to escape boredom." Killer dialogue. Check out the insulted socialites remarking, "He was referring to us," and "Blakely's going too far." Little do they know what Blakely has in mind when he bellows cheerily, "What say, folks? Let's compromise. We'll finish the party in the mine. Our miner pal here will guide and feast his eyes on us, and as for us, we'll make merry in the bowels of the earth." Although it seems that we won't find out about that back room, I'll admit that this series of events is almost as entertaining. Believe it or not, the socialites love this idea, proclaiming, perhaps drunkenly, "The man's a genius!" and "On to the mine!" So off they march gaily toward the mine. Fittingly, once the guests are down below, inside the bowels of the earth, they are less enthused. "Ugh! What a horrid-looking place!" "Don't tell me. People actually work down here?" "George, I don't like this. This filthy mine. We shouldn't have come." I am not being dramatic when I say that, to me, this Clark Kent of Earth 2, Shuster and Siegel's Clark Kent, is a dastardly villain, despite any acts of good. While the socialites were taking in the scenery, he fell back so he could put his plan into action, attacking and damaging the tunnel supports. I totally get that he wants to force Blakely's hand when it comes to the working conditions, and I can also rationalize that endangering the bourgeoisie might sensitize them to the plight of the working class. Oh my god. However, this feels extreme and ill-advised and ill-conceived and just insane. It's just insane to me. I need to know what y'all think, especially if you are of the Eat the Rich political variety. Please let me know what you think about this act of Clark's and whether it puts him in the villain category on its own. Thanks. Sure enough, the damage Clark did causes a cave-in, resulting in high anxieties and tensions, despite Clark's assurance that they should have 24 hours spare. Blakely calms down, though, stating in an overly carefree manner, "We'll be freed by a rescue squad in no time." To which Clark soberly replies, "Maybe rescued in 5 minutes, maybe never." Blakely remembers that he had safety devices installed in the mine, but discovers the one nearby doesn't work. Clark informs him that Like other safety devices in the mine, rusty, no good. This pushes one guest over the edge. You blasted skinflint! If you'd have had the mine equipped with proper safety precautions, we might have gotten out alive! Well, isn't this a little on the nose? In what is for me the absolute greatest moment of this fairly shitty Clark so far, and in a moment that further supports my read that he is the world's greatest troll, he meets Blakely's desperation to escape with utter apathy, replying to the cruel man's commands of, "Take this pick and get busy," with, "I'm content to die. If you want to live, you dig." What a riot! I just wish that Clark was less cruel so I could enjoy him really showing these rich bastards a thing or two. And so, knee-deep in stagnant water, struggling with unwieldy tools, slipping, frequently falling, the entrapped pleasure seekers seek desperately, but vainly, to batter down the huge barrier of coal. Then, like a public service announcement, when Blakely is too winded to continue, his guest replies, "Think of the miners! They have to do this 14 hours each day!" Clark, should he have heard this, would have definitely been thrilled. Blakely sincerely despairs. "Oh, if I only had this all to do over again. I never really knew, what the men down here have to face." Do you think he's serious? I don't, but Clark does, remarking to himself, "That's all I've been waiting to hear." Whatever is it that Clark meant by that remark? Well, since he waits for everyone to pass out and then tears down the barrier, it seems that he was content to let them all die if they didn't learn their lesson. Like he was waiting for a reason to not allow them to die. What's your read on this, audience of mine? I know I called Clark a villain before, but this seems really, really bleak. In any case, this effort of Clark's does allow the rescue team that's been busy at work on the other end to succeed in their inevitable mission. Action Comics number 3 ends with Clark returning to Blakely, where the man proudly admits to learning from his experience in the mine. "You can announce that henceforth my mine will be the safest in the country, and my workers the best treated. My experience in the mine brought their problems closer to my understanding." How cute and pat of Shuster and Siegel. If only the world worked this way. Action Comics number 4 begins much the same way as the others, with a half-page spread informing the reader about the emergency Phuperman will be dealing with in this issue. This time around, it's another social justice issue, drunk driving. Color me shocked. Exhilarated by the demon speed, a drunken, irresponsible driver races faster still. Abruptly, a shrill shriek, a sharp impact. He has struck a pedestrian. Frightened beyond reasoning, the motorist presses his car to greater speed and flees in terror from the scene of his crime. Loving this phraseology, demon speed. Clark just happens to witness this, as well in the moments that follows this drunken hidden runner's car stalling out perfectly placed on some train tracks. A scene that in every way is just too neat for me. Here you can see Clark barely outspeeding the train, shouting at the man, "We've got to jump!" To which the drunken fool angrily responds, "Let go!" Clark still manages to jump out of the way, though. I think the art is getting better. What about y'all? just made it. But this fellow has died of a heart attack. Not too surprising, Clark, considering the past 10 minutes of that fellow's life. Now, for reasons unclear to me then, and unclear to me now, having finished the read. Seizing the edge of a window, Superman swings downward into a private room in the Pullman car. And right as he's entering, someone else is opening the door to that very room. More contrivance ensues, wherein the folks entering the room are conspiring to sabotage an upcoming American football game so that one coach, Randall, can keep his precious job. Clark decides to make this all his business, opting into a disguise strategy again to deal with the saboteurs mentioned in the previous conversation. Here he is shown trying to replace one Tommy Burke, one of the athletes, and remarking to himself, "Splendid. Now his own mother wouldn't know us apart." It's sort of comic to me that Clark looks pretty much the same, and so his comments reek of arrogance. It lines up with the rest of his personality as I see it. After a scene where the real Tommy's girlfriend rejects his request to go to the movies, citing his athletic failures as the reason, he promptly dumps her in response. Thus, we, the readers, arrive here, with Clark seemingly jumping the poor guy. "Don't move!" Clark shouts. Tommy replies, "What is this, a holdup? Good lord, you're me!" Please just look at this scene for a moment. Looks innocent enough until you realize that that pointy object in Clark's hand is a hypodermic needle. That's right. Burke lurches forward to attack. Instantly, he feels the sting of a hypodermic needle. He loses consciousness. I wish that I had been recording when I originally read this panel. I was so torn between laughter, disappointment, genuine fear about this Superman. I mean, holy shit. Clark Kent, Superman, in order to possibly protect one of the many athletes who are going to be targeted in some sort of act of sabotage, has decided to inject him with some sort of chemicals. This is so effed up. I don't know whether I really want to criticize Shuster and Siegel, or if this is just what they see Clark as willing to do. I would really appreciate some comments about your opinion about Clark doing this kind of thing, since it was so disruptive for me. Any feelings that I had that edged towards humor were viciously pruned away by this scene, leaving only terror and disappointment. Here, Burke regains consciousness to discover himself a prisoner in his own apartment, questioning, What have you done to me? I can't move." His jailer, Superman, psychotically responds with, "You needn't worry, you're just rendered passive by a drug." Yeah, no big deal. This is freaking lunacy. It gets worse, as you see, as Clark ignores Burke's desperate, "But what's the big idea?" with, "Merely this. I'm going to take your place in life for a few days. So long for now." No explanation given. This is not my Superman. I don't know how else to say this. This guy fucking sucks. Remember back to how Clark dealt with the lynch mob back in his origin? It's canon that he can control himself quite well, so I have to assume that the ignoring of that fact is intentional here by Shuster and Siegel, but I don't understand why they make this choice. Anyway, in a locker room brawl between an arrogant teammate of Burke's and Clark, when Clark lightly taps his foe, Ray Martin, You're looking at the result right now. Lightly taps. Worse yet, in the subsequent panels, it's shown that Martin was knocked out cold by the tap. You know, I really did like that scene in his origin where Clark definitely handles the mob. Where's that Clark? Where's my Superman? Next, Clark, still in Burke garb, gets banned from playing by the captain for all of the ruckus, even though poor Burke would have been merely defending himself if this had all played out as normal. Of course, desperate to pursue his mission, especially in consideration of the harm he's committed to Burke, I hope, Clark gets on the field anyway, causing an unbelievable scene where every athlete on both teams tries to tackle him. As you see, Superman leaps to the shoulder of one of the three oncoming players and springs over the other two, saying, "Alley-oop?" This issue is all over the place, not in a way that's fun either. We are full on nosediving into humor as Superman continues to dash down the field with the entire team hanging on to him. Sheesh. I'm really concerned about this Burke guy kidnapped in his own home, and we're just being treated to antics on a football field. The plot of this issue continues to be quite forced and somewhat shamefully devoid of drama. I say this because the fallout of Clark running the length of the field, dodging and managing two teams' worth of players amounted to little more than a news outlet's projection of the coach's honest telling of the sensational event. And as far as Burke was concerned, there was a mere one-panel snapshot of the two interacting and sipping tea. In the scene shown now, the saboteurs, Brains and Muscle, who have since found out about quote-unquote Burke's meteoric rise in talent, have arrived to take care of him. First, Brains tells Muscle, "You know what to do." Then Muscle proudly declares, "He's completely tied." To which Brains realizes it's strange he didn't struggle at all. This is, of course, because Clark is a MFN psychopath who has placed Burke under the influence of a sleep-inducing drug, as he is now observing them from the molding overhead. Clark will do whatever he wants. He is scary. If anyone wants to defend this guy's behavior, please do, please. I don't want to hate him. Clark is rising in my shit list fast, as he tails the bad guys, only to allow them to bring Burke into a deserted house for questioning anyway, as if Clark wasn't responsible for making this man go through enough hell already. It's at this point that I want to return to an earlier point I made about Clark really not being very wise. I guess we could look at this as a roundabout trolley problem scenario, with Clark giving himself permission in his typically Machiavellian style to do whatever he pleases to Burke, if it means sparing all other potential victims of any iota of suffering leading up to and during the planned sabotage. But I guess he's really hedging his bets on that. Not shown is Superman spying on this interaction through a window, convincing himself that Burke will be fine as the saboteurs don't mean him any physical harm. In the best scene of this comic, Burke's coach introduces, quote, Burke, quote, to Coach Randall, the scoundrel responsible for the saboteurs. Clark and Randall are left alone, resulting in this scene with Clark jabbing Randall in the chest with his finger, leering at him and sternly voicing, "I know all the dirty work you've been pulling. If you don't kick those thugs off the Dale team and resign your position as coach, I'll expose you after the game." Of course, Randall fakes ignorance. I don't know what you're talking about." 4 panels later, a twist. Back in the deserted house, Burke had struggled free of his bonds. He darts into the street, catching a taxi. "To the football field, and step on it!" I was disappointed to see that our twist is only for comedy, as Burke makes it to the stadium in time to spectate Clark scoring 2 touchdowns and body blocking to secure a third by proxy of his faux-cum teammate Ray Martin, all within a minute or two. Pissed as all hell, he thinks to himself, "He can't get away with this. I'll call a cop."
You can't keep getting away with this!
And it's in this very moment he happens upon his ex, telling her would-be nouveau beau, in the midst of his whining, "I wish you'd pay more attention to me. That you may be a tennis champ, but compared to my Tommy, you're a lily." Now he's thrilled and finds himself cheering himself along. "Come on, Burke! Hit that line! Tear him to pieces!" Some genuinely funny events here that unfortunately don't land because they don't mesh with the gravity of decision-making by our protagonist, and the reputation that I can't help but place on that protagonist being a modern reader. The main plot point ends less ceremoniously, with the saboteur's stabbing attempt not clearly depicted anywhere in the comic, and Clark having no reaction whatsoever to Randall's decision to resign. "Here, take this note. My resignation to Dale's University president." Somehow, at the end of the half, Phuperman meets Burke outside the locker room, where they cooperate like buds. I guess there is something to be said about Stockholm Syndrome, at least in fiction. "Quick, we've got to exchange clothes," Clark implores. Burke complies. "I get it. I'm to carry on now." The comic then ends with Burke getting knocked out on the field, as shown. He regains consciousness, and his girlfriend begs him to give up the brutal sport. And that's it. It's a strange comic. It's not like Shuster and Siegel knew about CTE, the brain injury that American football players are at risk for receiving. It's not like this is a social justice issue like the previous one. It's just Clark being kind of a prick. Anyway, let's move on. Action Comics number 5 continues the streak of omitting soups from the cover. Instead, there's this splash offered up as the top third of page 1. The lettering on Superman is way campier here compared to the 3D impact style of issues 2 through 4. Take a look yourself. Well, which do y'all like best? I'm partial to number 2, where Superman has a slight curvature and is of a darker red compared to that in number 4. Anyway, on to the story. The opening page informs readers that telegraph lines broadcast to the world news of a terrible disaster. The Valley Ho Dam is cracking under the strain of a huge downpour. Should it give way, a mountain of water will sweep down the valley, killing thousands and destroying the fertile land. These are some expert panels, milking juxtaposition for all it's worth. Look at the tininess of the people in frame in the bottom panel compared to the foam of a single wave. This really sells the idea of mountain water. Good work, Shuster and Siegel. I've already forgotten the travesties of last issue. Clark's editor is hollering for Kent, and when he doesn't stop, Lois Lane, who is wearing an unbelievably chic Christmas core getup, informs him that he isn't in the office. I love her single raised hand, which somehow conveys more annoyance to me than I can imagine was intended. Lois immediately counters the chief's calls for obsequiousness. "Well, look for him, Lois, and have him report to me before I lose my mind," with an earnest and just question. "But why not have me handle the assignment?" In typically sexist fashion, she's told, "Can't! It's too important! This is no job for a girl." Lois is totally unfazed, thinking, "No job for a woman, eh? I have half a mind to dress up as a man and do it myself. Or maybe reveal to the readers my competencies equate that of an elite level super spy." I know, we're going nowhere so crazy yet. But it makes me giddy seeing Lois's propensity to scheme as a foundational element of her character, something that fully legitimizes for me her development into a character that's capable of handling international terrorists, mobsters, and even some supervillains herself, even if it's not this Lois Lane. Look at the faces on our characters here. "Clark Kent! Just the man I'm looking for," Lois says, uncharacteristically eager. "You mean you're actually glad to see me?" Clark can't help but smile. Lois explains she needs a favor, to which Clark replies in a somewhat embarrassing manner. "Would I? You know I'd do anything for you." Okay there, Clark. Take it easy, buddy. We find out in the next panel, not shown, that Lois is actually baiting Clark. She tells him to go to a maternity ward because someone is expecting septuplets. Ha! Clark arrives at the city hospital to find out somebody's been spoofing you, pal. There's no Mrs. Mahoney registered here. I think Clark's face is priceless. At the same time, Lois is purchasing a round-trip ticket to Valley Ho. Clark, to his credit, is immediately suspicious, thinking, "Say, I wonder if Lois is by any chance pulling a double cross," and heads back to the office, wherein the editor verbally abuses him. "You brainless idiot! The greatest news story in months on the fire, and you waste your time at a hospital?" Clark manages to stutter out a typically pathetic, "But Chief, I didn't know." The chief does not care and berates him further, going on to say that the worst part of it is that the last train for Valley Ho has already left. In his frustration, the chief absolutely loses it. "Kent! Report to the cashier! You're fired!" Of course, Superman is going to get the story anyway. Clark races from the Daily Star building, leaping and bounding till he catches up with the train. "Looks like the train headed for Valley Ho," Clark remarks to himself, before entertaining himself further with a, "Well, hello, and goodbye," as he outruns it. It's far outdistanced, Clark notices. If Lois thinks she's gonna scoop me, she's badly mistaken. I love that the Clark-Lois rivalry is this old. Clark, despite his lack of super senses, gets close enough to the railroad trestle to observe some sort of surprise. Clark's movement in these panels follows the reader's eyes, a classic Shuster and Siegel technique that should go appreciated. Clark has noticed that it appears a torrent has loosened the bridge's supports, causing the tracks to tilt, making a wreck inevitable, just as the warning whistle of the approaching train is heard. With the twisted rail in view, I want to take a moment to point out the incredible quality of the art in this issue compared to the 4 that have preceded it. Here's our first big moment of Superman saving the day, directly making a life or death difference in the lives of many innocents. He dives down to the supports, exclaiming, "No time to lose." Then, seizing the bridge's supports, Superman presses up, until the tracks level. He continues holding the bridge as the train passes over. Then, as soon as he lets go, it crashes down behind the steam engine, causing a stir for its riders, one remarking in particular, "An instant earlier, and we'd have been killed." When the train reaches Valley Ho, Lois exits while a mob of rightfully scared people pile into the train. Lois attempts to hail a taxi, which yields this hilarious exchange. "Will you give me a lift to the dam?" Lois asks with urgency. The driver merely says, "You can have the car, lady. I'm taking a train out of here." The next panel is an immediate cut to Lois driving the taxi at top speed. It's even got a tire off the road. Meanwhile, atop the dam, Superman has been battling like mad to keep it from breaking. Here's the Boy Scout I've been looking for. He's coaching himself through the strain. If I can only hold out a little longer, most of the people hereabouts will have cleared out. I really appreciate the sober realism of this dialogue, emphasizing that this Clark doesn't naively believe that he could, or maybe that he doesn't need to, save everyone to be a hero. I appreciate that he's written as somebody who's recognizing that his responsibility is to mitigate the disaster to the greatest extent he can. This is such a striking difference to his portrayal and values in the last issue, and I'm quite relieved. Even Superman cannot last forever, and so, suddenly, despite his best efforts, with great fear, he notices, it's beginning to give! The disaster plays out quickly from here, as it would in the real world, with a huge dam collapsing immediately under the force. Lois, who has single-mindedly pursued reporting on this great disaster, now finds herself directly in the path of the great, irresistible flood of onrushing water. The dam's gone! I haven't a chance, she somberly realizes. Little could she know that Superman is on the scene, and Clark notices some woman caught in a car, not knowing it's Lois, of course. But sadly, he cannot reach the car before it's caught up and swept along by the flood. On screen now is the preceding panel, one that showed Lois trapped within the car as she appears doomed to a watery death. This is a dramatic and thrilling issue. I would recommend anybody read this issue. You should pause the video and go read the issue right now. On top of the great artwork, I hope you would agree that this is the best Shuster and Siegel have served up so far narratively. In an incredible scene, Supes swims down into the flood, tears apart the automobile. I mean, look at the damage on that thing. Saves Lois in the process, swims back to shore, if we could call it that. However, the flood is spreading out like a wildfire, and now Clark has to race it, as you see in the bottom panels. Eventually, he outpaces it, leaping atop a nearby rocky ridge. Unfortunately, these two great panels are immediately followed by a pair of horrifically, terribly, unfathomably poorly rendered ones. You'll see what I'm talking about right now. While holding the mountain and Lois, where is Lois? In these panels, where is Lois? Clark somehow uses one hand, again while holding the mountain and Lois, to rip the peak of the mountain off the rest of it to redirect the flood. I don't get it. Help me. Afterwards, Lois literally throws herself at Supes. I enjoy the dialogue here, though. You did it! You saved all those people! Oh, I could kiss you. As a matter of fact, I will. Clark's lady, please, had me in fits because I couldn't tell if it's a polite fuck yeah or more of a settle down there, little lady. Even though this third panel shows him enjoying himself, that could be after she kisses him. You know, he's only human, and I think it's still ambiguous. The sternness of his face in the second panel is just too funny in contrast to the grin in panel 3, where he goes, wow, what a kiss. Lois proudly says, a super kiss for Superman. This is an awesome issue. Although no more kissing is shown, the two must mac face quite a bit, because suddenly, sweeping Lois off her feet, Superman leaps outward, saying, enough of that. I've got to bring you back to safety, where I'll be safe from you. What a flirt. Clark's killing me. Unfortunately, Schuster and Siegel write Lois way over the top in terms of her affection for Superman in the rest of the scene, with dialogue I find distasteful and demeaning towards the character at best. The first time you carried me like this, I was frightened, just as I was frightened of you, Lois admits and then continues. But now I love it, just as I love you. Oh. It gets worse though, as you see. A few panels later, she anxiously shouts, "Don't go! Stay with me! Always!" It gets worse with every moment, with Clark ignoring all the affection with a simple, "Perhaps we'll meet again." It's just a shame that this happens in an otherwise wonderful issue, and one where the romance was campy for both parties in the first place. The issue ends with Clark hamming it up back at the office, having gotten his job back by phoning the editor-in-chief with exclusive information about the flood. How he had things to say that Lois didn't, I do not know, but my headcanon is that they said the same thing. And despite Clark having been fired, the chief gave Clark the credit because of his documented misogyny. As Clark leaves the phone booth, he encounters Lois! "That wasn't a nice stunt you pulled on me." "Oh, you're one to talk, Clarky. You're one to talk. But I still like you," he tells Lois. Why is he so intentionally pathetic? I don't understand his motivations. "Who cares?" Lois spits out, then thinks to herself, "The spineless worm. I can hardly bear looking at him after having been in the arms of a real He-Man." I find the end of the comic strange and disappointing like the previous scene, with Lois not questioning how Clark got to Valley Ho when she fed him hospital bait. After all, she must know how he got his job back. Furthermore, her dialogue focusing on Superman instead of the flood, when the issue opened with her doing whatever it would take to report on the flood, felt incredibly short-sighted and disrespectful of her character. The penultimate issue of 1938, Action Comics number 6, also has a Clarkless cover. So here is the half-page flavor splash, included now with the purpose of informing readers who Superman is, rather than introducing the tone of the story. Interestingly, the Champion of the Oppressed title is currently overshadowed by the far more boring, Strongest Man on Earth. The text reads, "Dedicated to assisting the helpless and oppressed is a mystery man named Superman." It continues to list out his powers as we already know them. The story's first panel proper shows Shuster and Siegel establishing a degree of continuity, showcasing 4 different newspapers reporting on Clark's act so far. The second panel shows us a more Clarky looking Clark. For what it's worth, I also love the color selection in this panel, as well as the face they decided to represent him with. Harking back to a conversation from Action Comics number 1, the narration tells us that Clark Kent is especially assigned to track down all Superman news. A detail pulling double duty as it primes new readers for the ironic reveal that Clark is Superman, while segueing into the early focus of the story. In panel 3, we see Clark introduced as the East reporter focused on all things Superman would be. To one Nick Williams, Superman's personal manager? Our reaction should match that of Clark's. What? Note the exclamation mark on its own line. Love it! In the final panel, and in a detail that may be story pertinent but feels like a clumsy way of expediting the identity reveal, Clark's shock about this man's bold-faced lie causes him to smush an ashtray as if it were paper. While Clark is quick to point out the absurdity of the claim, albeit perhaps a bit too quick, the editor-in-chief is much more interested in Williams' statements about commercial rights and the cash that's reportedly pouring in. In the panel that's shown, Williams smugly claims that printing stories about Superman will make both parties rich, and in fact that he can guarantee to give news of Superman's exploits before he pulls them, which is a bold and intriguing statement. To Clark's dismay, Williams is only somewhat full of hot air, and isn't just gearing up his scheme today. He's already got a radio show in the works, which is going to be aired every day at 5 o'clock p.m. As he turns on the radio, already impressing the chief, he draws their attention towards and then out the window as a blimp advertising Superman branded gasoline flies right on by. The chief steals words from this reader's mouth when he says, "Good Lord, what next?" Indeed, like an early infomercial, there is more. Look at this quality advertisement on the billboard, using Superman's cape to frame the car. It's just too cool. Not shown are some subsequent panels where Williams provides a non-exhaustive list of further products he has in mind, all ending with a meta joke. Why, I've even made provisions for him to appear in the comics. I love it. I freaking love it. What I love even more is the chief proceeding to unrustle his jimmies and become a professional again, if only for a spot, proceeding to ask the smug salesman how Superman even contacted him, which prompts Williams to claim that Superman dropped in on me and sprung the proposition. I liked the idea and we evolved a partnership. But Clark expresses heavy doubts, possessing motivation with which Williams could never fathom. This then prompts the scammer to propose a personal interview with Superman himself. You doubt me? Very well then. Would a personal interview interest you? I love how Clark is drawn in his response, chest out, confidently following up on Williams' challenge. I should say it would. In fact, I'd like to meet him very much. I'm actually a little surprised we're dealing with a Supes imposter story so early in the canon, but it is most certainly not unwelcome. An unnamed office boy, presumably one Jimmy Olsen, overhears all that's transpired so far, and promptly gossips with Lois. Can you imagine that, Lois? Clark Kent is gonna see Superman tonight, in person. Lois would rather die than give up a scoop to Clark, as evidenced by last issue. So we know she means it when she says, "He is? Then so will I." Lois stops Clark in the hall to say hi, flashing him an intense smile, and seemingly stunning him in earnest. "Hello, Clark." What? He stutters out, and then, "Did I hear correctly? Did you speak to me?" Calmly, Lois just says, "Yes, how are you, Clark?" Brilliant choice of background color here. Ever the charmer, and I strongly feel that it isn't a bit, but genuine frustration on the part of Clark, he can't help but address the elephant in the room, proclaiming, But I don't understand. I've been trying to date you for months, and you wouldn't even speak to me. And now, clear out of the blue, you flash me the most breathtaking smile I've ever seen." Lois lathers it on thick here. "It's really quite simple. I've come to my senses and appreciate you at last, that's all. Will you take me out tonight, Clark, to celebrate it?" Making it clear her plan is to be brought along with Clark to meet Superman after their date. What a trickster. First, take a gander at the final panel, numbered 29. Here we're made privy to each character's internal monologue, with Clark well aware of Lois's trickery. "How easy you are to convince that I'm putty in your hands," he thinks. At the same time, she's thinking, "How easily I can twist you around my finger." This is fun and good writing. As an aside, I think this scene functions as sufficient evidence that Clark is in the midst of brewing up the Clark Kent persona. Furthermore, back in panel 26, the second of this grouping, when he goofily responds to her proposition with an eager, "Gladly, but wait, I just remembered. I've an important assignment for tonight," which in turn prompts Lois's ire. Do you mean you prefer your assignment to me? It's because he's got plans of his own. No, not that, I mean, Clark musters in response to Lois's challenge, and cracking her facade if I do say so. Furiously, she fires back, I see! You're just as weak and unromantic as ever. Well, in that case, I'll withdraw my offer to... This makes her whole shtick seem insincere now. I'm surprised that Clark's the better actor of the two. Lastly, he assuages her concerns. Wait, don't be hasty, I'll take you out. But first, you'll accompany me on my assignment. If you don't mind. It won't take long. I think it's too funny that Clark gives Lois exactly what she wants, and that Shuster and Siegel allow us to know that he does so knowingly. I'm most curious now about Clark's ultimate goals with including Lois. Hopefully it's some selfish and morally suspect trickery like more Superman makeout time, and not something actually cruel like leaving her somewhere. Moving on, I wanted to point out the juxtaposition of these two little panels, with the heavy-handed irony in the first, Lois thinking, I'm so excited, in a little while I'll be seeing Superman, if only Clark would hurry. Which makes Clark's trolling down below, Lois, I care for you so much, if you'd only, all the funnier. Plus, Lois's failure to follow through on her earlier lies. Pardon, but the song has ended. It's just so comically clinical and distant. The writing here is really, really fun. The floor show that follows is a song about Superman. Because, of course it is. Clark glances sidewise at Lois. Enthralled by the magic of the song, her eyes have a distant, charmed look. Meanwhile, back at Williams's private office, his imposter questions the wisdom and consequences of his earlier boasting. Are you certain asking that reporter to come here was a wise thing to do? Then, as shown, suppose he suspects that I'm just an actor you hired to play the role of Superman. Williams assures him that they'll have staged tricks to trick the reporter, and further reveals that he figured that seeing a Superman is probably just a myth. Someone might just as well cash in on the publicity. The poor sucker's in for a rude awakening. Or perhaps not, because after Clark suggests that they leave, Lois pushes for a last drink, into which she surreptitiously drops a drug, making even Superman sleepy. Or so it seems right now. I'm actually excited to find out if Clark is faking, or if Lois ends up busting Williams' scam because of her first-hand experience with her champion. As an aside, what is going on with the casual administration of foreign substances to innocents' bodies by protagonists in these comics? This is weird. It's some uncomfortable and dark stuff, and it's unclear for me at the moment how normative of the zeitgeist it was for such motifs to appear in fiction. In particular, the comics. To be clear, I mean the motif of protagonists being willy-nilly about drugging people, not the drugging itself. Back to the story. Shuster and Siegel reveal that Clark has been unaffected by the drug, while Lois attempts to make off with an exclusive story. Well, it's explicit that the drug didn't, and thus implicit that certain others would not, affect Clark. It's unclear if he merely noticed visually, caught on to her scheme and acted in accordance, or if he tasted and smelled it and thus acted in accordance. I hope it's the latter option of the two, because super senses are yet to be confirmed for our hero, and it would be exciting to add to the repertoire. Lois arrives to a confused Williams, who summons the clumsy actor, merely climbing through a window from the ledge outside, totally unheroically, and then, without so much as a greeting, recites his script. I've come as you requested. Is this the reporter who doubts I've authorized you to be my manager? Damn, this is a funny issue. Looking forward to when Clark arrives and things really get screwbally. But first, Lois immediately challenges the faker's feats with a resounding "No!" when asked if she's convinced. Furthermore, she says she's going to prove that you're nothing but a pair of fakers. 1, 2, 3. Cardboard, aluminum, and dropping the fact she's met Soups. She sure shows them, and they let her. Well, up until she tries to leave. Suddenly, a true villain, Williams, grabs Lois's arm, saying, "Oh no you don't. You know too much. And you're smart. Too smart for your own good. And we can't afford to let you leave here alive." This issue is so campy, so righteously campy, I could die. The other intrusive thought I have is, man, do y'all think Shuster and Siegel despise capitalism or what? This guy Williams goes from wanting to run a seemingly smart scam, given that he thought Superman wasn't real, to being immediately down with committing murder and having to manage an accessory to said murder, just to avoid financial loss. Given this story alone, I wouldn't make the claim, but if we recall, the football story was motivated by someone's job insecurity, the mine story focused on someone who prioritized profits over people and their safety, and the original story culminated in Clark forcing a munitions lobbyist and manufacturer to understand that the profits yielded in such a pursuit weren't always worth it. All in all, it seems plausible to argue that the men making the Superman comic were anti-capitalists. Back to the attempted murder, Williams demands that the Phuperman, phony Superman that is, help him get her to the window. We've got to throw her to her death. Jesus! He is 1,000% on board with the murder idea, even after verbalizing it. Phuperman is a villain too, going along with it without too much protest, huffing his copium deep, telling himself, we'll call it accidental or suicide, eh? In the omitted subsequent panel 76. Indeed, they've killed Lois. Or really, she's killed herself. Or at least that would have been the case if she had successfully drugged Clark. The irony is pungent. There's still the question of how far behind Clark was, not in my mind, but perhaps in a new reader's. Who is arriving immediately in time to see Lois tossed from the window, but one Clark Kent? I think Lois would have broken her neck based on the artwork in panel 80 there. Yikes. Of course she's fine though. As Clark jumps up the building and through the very same window Lois was tossed from, Phuperman and Williams has successfully reached the elevator, having witnessed the rescue of Lois. Unfortunately, the elevator is no boom tube, if you know, you know, and suddenly, what's wrong? I can't understand it. The elevator is rising. In reality, the explanation is simple. Superman has seized the cable and is pulling up the massive elevator, hand over hand, in what might be his scariest panel yet, since he's got a reason to be pissed off for once. Get out, before I let the car drop, Clark furiously demands of the men. Then, foolishly, as they clamber out, the Phuperman makes a feeble attempt at resistance, uppercutting Superman and breaking his fist. Closing out the story, a strange quartet speeds through the air high above the earth. Gosh, this is such a lovely panel. It's beautiful, it's romantic, and funny, all at once. Please pause the video and really give this one a gander. The very end of the comic features Superman taking the crooks to jail, where he requests that Lois take them in and press a charge of attempted murder. While she assures him that he can be certain that I will, she then throws herself feverishly at him. But when will I see you again? I must see you, I must! Just as the accused attempt to lie their way out of things, Phuperman spots Clark and, sufficiently intimidated, spills the beans, prompting Williams's "You dirty double-crosser!" for one last dash of irony, since it was Williams who betrayed Phuperman's trust. Not saying that Phuperman was a good guy, And while a bad guy in the heat of things, I wouldn't equate this fellow's willingness to participate in a scam to William's rapid acceptance of murder. Good God. Finally, as if it were promised by the advertisement at the end of Action Comics number 6, we have a Superman cover, albeit one with nothing to write home about beyond its historical significance. The opening half-page splash shows us a feat of Superman's strength, while implicitly pleading that its viewer doesn't question why he's disrupting these citizens' trolley trip. Interestingly, it seems like Clark's boots are miscolored yellow here. Also, the impact-style lettering for the title is back. Hell yeah! By far the most compelling thing in the splash is that Clark's feet exceed the bounds of the panel. A technique I did not expect to see so early in comics. The rest of page 1 features office bully, new character, Curly, who derides Clark in front of their co-workers, messing with his tie twice. Here we see Shuster and Siegel, and diegetically Clark, finding their footing with the contrasting personas. Page 2, none of which is shown here, clumsily transitions the reader from the Daily Star to the Jordan Circus, where the reader observes one Derek Niles extorting the circus owner as Clark arrives. As seen now, Clark lets himself in after the argument. Beg pardon, I'm from the Daily Star. Have you anything to say for publication? The owner, lost in thoughts, whirls around. What? Who? Oh, a reporter. He then details all the typical circus thrills which he feels should be reported on in the Star's paper. I liked the artistic details in this panel, namely the polka dot curtains and that comb sticking out of the small square mirror on the wall. Clark had heard enough of the argument, such that when the owner, Jordan, embellishes, "You can tell them too that we've hired several hundred extra attendants to help handle the huge audience we expect to have attend. Got that?" Clark can't help but feel for the poor, brave old man. Faced with bitter disappointment and certain defeat, he has yet the courage to keep up an optimistic front. A guy like that deserves a break, and by golly, that's just what I'm gonna give him. I like seeing sensitive Boy Scout Clark compared to the bully of the first few issues. The remainder of the third page showed the opening ceremonies playing out to a nearly empty audience, ending off with Clark acknowledging, "The show is good, but it lacks flash, and that's where Superman takes a hand." This story isn't very thrilling at the moment, and it seems silly that this is where Clark wants to spend his energy, after starting out by dealing with munitions lobbyists. Oh well. Incredibly, Shuster and Siegel show and explain Clark's quote-unquote transformation into Superman for the first time. Within the privacy of Clark Kent's apartment, a miraculous transformation occurs. Off come glasses and street clothes. Clark's meek figure straightens erect, and a few instants later, the retiring reporter is replaced by the dynamic Superman. Note, the word retiring here is used to refer to someone in the process of closing out their day, which is not common anymore. The transition panels reveal that Clark's yellow boots are a seemingly intentional decision, and I gotta say, I like them a lot. What do you guys think? We can also see Clark exceeding the boundaries of a panel again, abetting the feeling of his speed. It's pretty neat. Clark, as Superman, arrives at Jordan's trailer. Then, as typical, he lets himself in, announcing, "Turn around and don't be alarmed. A burglar," Jordan declares. "Well, you've come to the wrong place, fella. You won't find enough in this flop show to buy you a package of cigarettes." While Clark is trying to explain himself, again, as typical, without so much as an apology, Jordan grabs his automatic out of a drawer behind him, ordering Clark to raise him. "The next place you're breaking into is jail." I love this dialogue. Much to my dismay, Clark is so arrogant, so self-assured, that he declares, or in Jordan's perspective likely threatens, If you won't listen to and believe me, there's nothing left for me to do except to... Jordan interrupts. Keep back, I warn you. And Clark continues, let me have that gun. You're liable to hurt yourself. Clark's social skills are abysmal. Clark is such a dick. I'm so disappointed. Rather than simply snatching the gun away from Jordan and hearing his concerns out, he taunts the man, mustn't play with dangerous toys, and proceeds to crush the gun to a pulp. Clark is so dumb. He wants to help this guy out by saving the circus, but he destroyed the guy's only means of self-defense, something that probably was somewhat costly. I don't get it. This does not feel like Shuster and Siegel being short-sighted. This just feels like Clark being dumb. What do you think? I need other perspectives. Help me out. Again, without so much as an apology for the destruction of the man's property, he simply informs Jordan that he wants a job with your circus as a professional strongman. When Jordan questions why this Superman fellow should be the strongman, despite him literally crumpling the gun, Clark asks him to step outside, and then uses the opportunity to taunt the poor fellow some more, asking him, can your strongman do this, as he lifts a cart above his head? Tame enough? And then, or this, as he knocks the wheel off of the cart with a hook. And finally, or this, as he punts the damn thing off into the horizon without so much as a thought for where it might land, who it might inconvenience, or worse yet, who it might harm. This Superman friggin' sucks. After some more yakking, Clark clarifies that he's indeed the Superman that the buzz has been buzzing about. And so we have Jordan excitedly embracing Clark, proclaiming, Superman, working for me? Oh baby, I'm dreaming. This is too good to be true. As shown in the other panel, news of Superman's participation in the circus travels far and wide. Embarrassing, if you ask me. Precisely because of this hubbub, our villain, Derek Niles, and our darling Lois Lane both decide to attend the circus. They pass within an inch of each other, unsuspecting that the future will again cause their paths to cross. Here's another example in this issue of a panel element, in this case dialogue, bleeding over the bounds of the panel. Awesome! I just wish the contents of the story were as awesome as their depictions. The circus starts off with its usual affairs, but the crowds are only there to see Superman, so they heckle, "We want Superman! We want Superman!" Shown, acceding to the audience's demands, the ringmaster, who rightfully declares, "It is impossible for us to continue the ordinary show in this bedlam, and so yielding to your request, we waste no time in presenting Superman!" To everyone's dismay, when the ring is cleared, a professional strongman walks into its center and commences to lift heavy weights. Just as Niles and his cronies celebrate the prospect of Jordan going bust over the apparent lie, a figure high overhead seizes a trapeze bar and swings outward in a mad series of wild gyrations. Every eye is glued to it. A slip of the hand, and suddenly the figure plunges down towards the earth. The audience is aghast, realizing, "There's no net, he'll be killed!" They watch. Down he plunges, twisting and turning with the wild abandon of a high diver, whirling, spinning, somersaulting, only to land, to the accompaniment of gasps, feet first, erect, and totally unharmed. Rapidly, Clark leaps forward and scoops up the strong man and waits to begin juggling them with the greatest of ease. Clark, asshole that he is, mocks the strong man for no reason. "What puzzles me is which is the greatest dumbbell," Clark says. When the audience finally processes what it is that they're seeing, they begin cheering their lungs out. And that's before Clark lifts this elephant over his head. Seeing how much fun he's having makes me wonder how much of Clark deciding to save the Jordan Circus was because he pitied the man, and how much was because he knew it would be such magnificent fun to do so. Lois gets rejected from seeing Phuperman after the show, and to Shuster and Siegel's credit, despite any claims I've made about Lois's bombastic attraction to Phuperman coming across as infantilizing and or misogynistic, they explicitly inform us that in all ways, Lois isn't the type to give up easily once she's made up her mind. I love the look of grit on her face while she realizes, if I were to conceal myself in his dressing room tonight, I'd catch him when he reported to work in the morning. As if it were a good idea and not something totally unhinged. Lois trespasses by crawling under the tent, remarking to herself in what I find to be a nice touch. Haven't done this since I was a kid. Considering the importance of Lois, it's preferable to imagine her having a rich, adventurous childhood despite societal expectations for girls in the early 20th century. Anyway, once within the tent, she halts with a quick intake of breath as she sights a shadowy figure ahead. A prowler! In one of their finest panels so far, Shuster and Siegel show the saboteur quickly catching up to Lois. It's a dame! This speed is deftly communicated by how off-balance Lois is, the position of the man's hat and tie, and the motion lines above the small stand. In a further nice touch, the watchdog pet of the circus, named Cracks, halts on his rounds as he hears a suspicious sound. Heroically, he charges at the dark figure in the big tent and is promptly kicked unconscious by the brutal man, himself brashly shouting, "Take that, you nosy mutt!" While doing so, Lois comes to just in time to hear how displeased Niles is with his underling. "You were a fool to bring the girl here. Now I've got to get rid of her. Go down to the circus, Trigger," the henchman's name apparently, "and telephone me when the accidents occur." One of these prepped accidents is the loosing of Leo the lion, which Clark handles easily. Then, as shown, he catches the circus's trapeze artist, and a moment later, rushes to hold rigid the main pole of the big tent to avoid its collapse. When one of the employees notices that good old Cracks is hounding a man attempting to leave, Phuperman comes to the logical conclusion that the man knows something about the deliberate attempts to ruin the circus. Phuperman immediately physically intimidates the fellow by tossing him high into the air and catching him. Trigger spills the beans, which prompts Phuperman to speed off to Niles' office. The scene when Clark arrives is strange and comical, with Niles fainting after realizing his gun is totally ineffectual. Lois notes this and then says, "Wait! I want to thank you for saving my life." Clark only says, "Some other time." I don't understand why he is in such a rush, considering we know he does indeed like Mac and Face with Lois, and I doubt he would have any moral qualms about doing so. We get an epilogue featuring the irrelevant bully Curly and a spiteful Clark, potentially creating a great deal of suspicion if this were anything more than a gag taking up space, that is. He reaches out and rips the man's clothes off of his back, saying out loud, "Why, Curly, you're undressed." And so, unceremoniously, Phuperman's first calendar year of adventuring comes to a close. Some final thoughts for this edition of the Almanac. Action Comics number 3, The Mine Party. Number 5, The Flood and Lois Rescue. And number 6, Phuperman, are definitely worth your time. The other issues, if you're really into Superman or you want to get the full picture and this video wasn't enough, check them out. Anyway, next time we'll be taking a similar look at the Batman's first year of adventuring. This has been Troy with Almanac Comicopia, wishing you well.